Welcome everyone to our panel discussion about graduate admissions, and we hope that this workshop offered by Dollars for Scholars will be very helpful. So I'm Cindy, I'll be moderating tonight's event. And yeah, here I am so happy to have panelists Alfred, Winnie, Alex, and Merrick. Together, we hope to bring together some of our, experiences, having been through, the grad school process, and hopefully we get to share our insights to you guys. So, it'll help you guys decide for yourselves whether grad school is something you are interested in. All right, so just gonna go around and quickly introduce ourselves. I'm Cindy, class of 14. I got both my bachelor's and master's degrees at Stanford University. My bachelor's was in finance, and my master's was in operations research. And I currently work at the Federal Reserve here in Philadelphia, and I just started this new job, actually in a very exciting field. It is in machine learning and AI. So with that, I am going to pass it on maybe first to Alfred.
Hi, everyone. I am a recipient, a scholarship recipient from 2013. And I later went on to attend Columbia University, where I graduated in 2017. I majored in economics and political science. After a gap year, I then went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison for law school, where I received my JD in 2021. I also obtained an MBA from the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School a year later. Right now, I work for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Republic of China, Taiwan. And my former job experiences include AmCham Taiwan and KMT Chinese Nationalist Party. Look forward to the panel. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I will pass it to Alex.
Hey everyone, my name is Alex. I was DFS class of 2008. I graduated from the University of Chicago in 2012, worked for a few years, and then got my PhD in statistics at Penn State in 2022, so basically last year. After that, and even during that, I've just been working in data science. So right now I'm a senior data scientist at the Boston Consulting Group. And before grad school, in between grad school and undergrad, I also worked in data science and analytics at Grubhub and Zynga. So yeah, looking forward to talking about the process of applying to grad schools, especially for people that, might be considering it. Yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you, Alex. And now Winnie.
Hi, good evening. Good to see everyone. My name is Winnie. I was part of Dollars for Scholars class of 2010. I got my bachelor's at Cornell. I studied environmental science, and then I took a gap year and then went to medical school at Touro College of Osteopathic Medicine in Harlem. So after I studied there, I did internal medicine residency out at Stony Brook Southampton Hospital. So it was in internal medicine, so for 3 years. And then after that, I did a fellowship in geriatric medicine. So that was 1 year. And then, so finally, I'm starting my first real job. I'm a hospitalist at North Shore University. So thank you for having me. And I look forward to the discussion.
That's awesome. Thanks, Winnie. All right, last but not least, Merrick.
Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Merrick. I graduated from UPenn a little over a year ago in 2022. I studied business analytics and management with a minor in computer science. Had a variety of different experiences at Penn. I studied luxury retail in Italy, and I worked in the music industry in Australia. Really just took as many of the opportunities that I could. But I think over time really honed in on my love for retail and consumer work. So I worked with a retail tech startup and with an apparel company in a growth marketing role. And currently I'm working in management consulting at McKinsey, focusing on consumer work, so retail, apparel, food and beverage, the kind of stuff that we would interact with every day. And what kind of brings us here today? So I'm part of Harvard's 2+2 program, which is a deferred MBA, meaning that I was admitted to Harvard Business School and will be deferring my admission for at least a couple of years before pursuing my MBA, but excited to be here.
Great, thank you, everyone. All right, so this is kind of, we're already touching on it, just a very general overview. What motivated each and every one of you to apply for graduate school? Like what was going through your head?
Yeah, I can start. My path was pretty straightforward because really, when I was in high school, I was preparing to apply for college, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to study, so I kept a pretty open mind. And then that summer, I volunteered at a hospital, and I really enjoyed the experience. Just being in that environment, just and being exposed to all the personalities of the staff and the patients. So I went to college with the idea that I would be pre-med, and I was kind of open to other things in the meantime, but really nothing appealed to me more. So I just continued on the pre-med track and went on from there.
For me, it was mostly just after graduating from undergrad, I liked the work I was doing, but it was very clear that the kind of data science work I needed to do required me to go back to school at some level because I hadn't really studied that extensively in undergrad. And then kind of through, I guess, just happenstance, I ended up at a PhD program. It ended up working out well, but yeah, so the basically it was an idea of like I needed to go back to school because like the learning I was getting on the job wasn't gonna cut it for what I wanted to do, basically.
And I can share that just broadly speaking, some reasons for attending or applying to law school include your development of professional knowledge and skills, gaining a competitive edge in the job market. Some people are interested in because they would like to pursue an academic and research career. But anyhow, attending grad school definitely increases earning potential and gives you the opportunity to network with other professionals in your field. For me personally, I thought that the professional training that I received at Columbia, which emphasizes the core curriculum and general education to be inadequate. And most of the areas of study were more theoretical, like economics and political science. Second, my father was an attorney. So growing up, I saw him practice various areas of the law, like real estate, matrimonial, incorporation, immigration. And later he went on to labor and employment, as well as consumer protection cases. And finally, I would say my interest in government and politics and the kind of professional training and the way of thinking that you develop in law school, it really teaches you to think about how to address socio-political issues and policy problems. So these are some of the reasons why I decided to apply and attend law school. Thank you.
Again, my experience will be a little bit different, just because the deferred MBA program that I'm part of, you can only apply when you're a senior in college. So kind of my experience there was, at first, I wasn't sure whether I even wanted to do an MBA at all because I had studied business already in undergrad. And I only decided to apply in my senior year after my friend actually encouraged me to. And the thing is that with the deferred, with the HBS 2+2 program, there's really no real downside to applying for it because if you don't get in, like you can always apply and like your application has no effect on the future. And then if you do get in, there's no commitment saying like you have to go eventually. Like, it's just an extended offer saying like, we want you, you can go if you want, but you do not have to. And for me, the reason why I wanted it was to be able to take a risk. The whole idea of this program is that you can go out and do whatever you want. And if it doesn't work out, you will have the 2+2 program to fall back on. So like for me, my plan is to spend 2 years in consulting, then probably something else for 2 years, and then likely go to business school to really get into entrepreneurship and then start something there.
Really awesome. I actually really like the strategy. All right, and we're going to move on just to thinking about the application and interview process. What was that like in general, and what were some of the helpful, resources you used?
I can start because I think my process was a little bit different because I actually applied for PhDs twice. So out of undergrad, I applied for econ PhDs because that was my undergrad major. And then I applied again after working for a bit. But basically the process is pretty straightforward for grad schools that aren't the like not law, not medicine, not business. You take the GRE, which I'll let you know right now, it's mostly just it's a filter. It's necessary but not sufficient. So getting a high score in the GRE is like kind of expected. So getting a low score will kind of, you want to bring that score up, but getting a high score is not like that. That's like the starting line for you to be able to apply. And then applying for a lot of PhD programs, it really depends on the specific field you want to study in. But generally speaking, for a lot of the STEM and science-based ones, the path is kind of like this. So there are a lot of competitive applicants. So either in undergrad or right after undergrad, you should be doing something that's related to necessarily like research or working in kind of like a research lab. If you're doing something like biology or psychology or something like that, that means you're just going to be an RA for some professor or in some lab. If you're doing something that's, you know, a little bit different, you know, if you're doing some more technical kind of work or research kind of work, like working at the Fed, for example, as Cindy is doing, actually is probably one of the clearest paths towards getting an econ PhD, for example. But also doing the kind of like, you know, like data science work or like statistician work beforehand, like just showing that you're able to kind of do like the technical work and research is one of those things that'll help you out, whether you do that in undergrad or like right after undergrad. Then you kind of, it's kind of like informal here. It's that you need to like figure out what kinds of research topics you're broadly interested in. Find schools that have professors like that, because at the PhD level, it's less about the school specifically. It's more about any kinds of profs you want to work with, because it depends on the topic that you want. And then it's a matter of being able to reach out to those professors, asking if you're able to talk with them, you know, trying to get, you know, connections with them. Sometimes from your undergrad, you also have, you know, the professors you'll work with or take classes with will have connections at other schools as well. And then the actual application process is pretty standard. You write a bunch of statements, I feel like a research statement, something like that, your kind of standard grad school application essay. And then it's more about just trying to find a research fit and selling yourself as a research fit for particular professors or schools or labs. Depending on this kind of program you're going into, sometimes you're going into the program as a whole, in which case you're looking at like a relatively larger group of people. But like Cindy said, sometimes you're looking at like applying to specific professors, in which case you're going to get flown out for interviews with, or sometimes you have to pay for those interviews yourselves. Not great, but you'll have to basically fly out to those schools, and there'll be visit days where you are being interviewed by those professors to figure out like if they want you, and also if you want to work with them. And then offers are extended after those interviews.
Very well put. And you're absolutely right about, you know, just like aspiring, you know, PhD, like econ PhDs, like I can't tell you how many of them are at like all these Federal Reserves. It's not just the Philadelphia, you know, all 12 banks pretty much. I see them every single day, and it's pretty much everyone wants to come here because it's just like, oh, it's like a real flashing big signal, like, yes, we are cut out for the PhD. All right, anybody else?
The process of applying for medical school is fairly standard as well. Like a lot of essays, letters of recommendations, you fill out your research or extracurricular experience. For medical school, they do, and it's kind of like the GRE, I guess. It's their version of the MCAT, is the admission test that you take. And then after you submit everything, some medical schools have will ask you to write more essays that are specific to their medical school. And after that, you get your interview offers, and then you decide which one you want to choose. I'll touch up on a little of the residency application process after that, because I didn't really know about it prior to applying. And the way residency, we call it the match. How that works is you apply, you know, write more essays, you submit letters, and whatever specialty you want to apply for, there's the residency length ranges from 3 to 5 years. So internal medicine, pediatrics, those are typically 3-year programs. And then surgery or interventional radiology, all those are more like 5 years, so longer. And the way residencies, there's a finite number of residency spots in the United States because a long time ago, Congress decided that they're only going to pay because when you're a resident, you do have a salary and that's paid for by the government. So without any government approval, they can't expand the number of residency spots. The problem is over the last few years, more and more medical schools are opening up. So you have a lot of students that are entering into the residency application pool, and you have a finite number of spots that are not really growing to match the supply of medical students. And so it is very stressful because there are every year a number of medical students that might not match into a residency spot. So it's like you paid medical school tuition, you spent 4 years studying, but now you can't kind of move on to the next step of the training process. So it's a bit of a stressful process. After you're done with residency, if you want to do fellowship and self-specialize, you apply for that. So it's just kind of a never-ending cycle of applying and interviewing. But there are its benefits, which I guess we'll talk about later.
I think law and medicine are similar in that there are typically no law or medicine majors in the United States, and in many colleges and universities, there isn't necessarily a business major. So the study becomes typically undertaken at the graduate or professional level. And there are currently 196 law schools approved by the American Bar Association. And this figure is compared to nearly 4,300 colleges and universities. There are about 1,200 business schools, and medical schools are even fewer, about 158. And in fall 2021, the total number of students enrolling in JD programs amounted to about 120,000, with about 43,000 beginning the first year of law school and 35,000 really graduating. And for law schools, there exists an informal category of top 14 or T14 law schools. And these schools typically obtain the top 14 spots in the US News and World Report ranking of the American law schools. And so there are about 9 such schools on the East Coast: Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Penn, NYU, Duke, Virginia, Cornell, and Georgetown. 3 in the Midwest, including Chicago, Northwestern, and Michigan, and 2 on Stanford and Berkeley. And a little bit about the application overview. Typically, the most important factors include the undergraduate GPA, which should reflect rigorous coursework and performance in the political science, history, or English. Although in recent years, people do come from backgrounds that are less typical of law school admittees. So some people may come from physics or engineering or science backgrounds. And you should also do your best to do well on the law school admission test. And with the LSAT score, the top score is 180, though scores above 170 are generally considered competitive. Many law schools in recent years, about 50, if I'm not mistaken, are accepting GREs. So from my experience, I thought a GRE was an easier exam. So maybe you should take mock tests for both the LSAT and GRE to consider which can reflect a stronger performance. And so aside from GPA and LSAT score, your recommendation letters and your personal statement are also reviewed. So it is preferable that you submit your application by Thanksgiving. My experience was to apply to about 8 to 12 law schools, and this is similar to college admissions where you identify dream, target, and safety schools. And finally, law schools are known to provide good scholarships. So if you have admission credentials that are typically strong for the schools of a similar such ranking, then those schools, in order to attract to recruit you, they may award they may offer a more substantive scholarship to attract your attendance and enrollment. And I would just say that most law schools in the United States, they share a similar curriculum. Typically in the first year, you have foundation courses in civil procedure, constitutional law, contracts, criminal law, torts, and legal research and writing. And so this is quite similar curriculum-wise across law schools. And similar to college and university admissions, there's also an early decision in law school. So similarly, early decision programs are binding, so applicants must commit themselves to matriculating if admitted through early decision. And in ED, you enjoy typically higher acceptance rates than in regular decision. And it provides a way for applicants who know that law school is their first choice to receive an admission and scholarship decision much earlier. And yeah, that's a quick overview of law school in America, and happy to take questions later on. Thank you.
Super. Yeah. I mean, always you have to keep in mind kind of the competitive nature of just what you're looking at, and plan accordingly.
For deferred MBA applications, so with these, you apply in your senior year of undergrad. And really like the first step with them is, well, actually, I would say the first step of them is just deciding like what schools you want to apply to, because there are a couple of schools with deferred MBA programs. Think about like which ones you actually want to apply to. If you had an extended offer, which ones would you actually take? And then after you decide that, then you take the GMAT. Once you've decided that you want to actually go to the school, then you would take the GMAT. You can also take the GRE, which I know Alex spoke about a bit. Yeah, you could also take the GRE. I just decided to do the GMAT because the GMAT specifically for business school, the GRE is a lot for a lot of different schools. I only was interested in business school, so I only took the GMAT. Then you have the actual application. So there are, like I mentioned, there are a few schools with deferred MBA programs. And the thing is that applying to these programs, it's a very reflective process. So people say that, regardless of whether it works out, they're glad that they went through this process because it makes you think a lot about everything you've done throughout college, both like in college and your work experiences. It makes you think about like what drives you and kind of what you want to do next. So as part of the application process, you'll talk about your work experiences, your extracurriculars, give a short description about them, the impact that you've had. And then you'll also have a personal statement. These tend to be open-ended from what I've seen. It could be anything, but that's like, what matters most to you and why? Or it could be just a space where it's like, talk about anything you want here. And then after the application, then you would have an interview. It varies from school to school how many would get an interview. And the style of these interviews will vary also from school to school. Sometimes it's a group interview. Sometimes it's more similar to a job interview. In my experience for HBS, it's a very customized interview. So they'll ask questions really specific to your application. I actually thought it was really fun because they'll ask really, really good questions about, why did you decide to do that? Oh, like if you were to do something differently, like what would you have done? I think it was a really reflective process, and I'm glad I went through it.
So it's just a last question. How did you think your experience at the graduate school impact you personally and or professionally? Any benefits?
I can start. I think personally, there were three things I think impacted me a lot from grad school. So the first is I met my wife in grad school. That's always great. The second is that I think the kind of training that you get in a PhD program at grad school is pretty intense. And I think that there's not a lot that's really comparable to it. I think in undergrad, I felt things were rushed because I was in a school that had a quarter system, and that's every 11 weeks you're finished with a class. And I think that maybe that came close, but this was, I think, a level above that. And it's just it is a little all consuming. So when you're in a PhD program, it's you're always thinking of your research. So first off, the first 2 years are coursework. And then after the first 2 years, you have 3 to however many years it takes you to finish the research. And once you get to that stage, it's kind of that's always on your mind at all times of the day. At least if you're doing well in grad school. If you're just I don't want to do this anymore, then great, you just take a master's and leave. But during the course of like most days, like you're always kind of thinking about your research or like the stuff you're doing. And if you're working in some kind of like and that's where a lot of the, I guess, humanities and like the non-lab STEM majors, if you're in like a lab, you're oftentimes just spending hours and hours in like a lab in a building somewhere. Just the stereotype of like, doing pipetting or like just like watching materials grow or stuff like that. And that's like just a lot of time spent there. So it's a very kind of like comprehensive, encompassing life process. But it's great because it like, it's kind of one of the few places you get that kind of intensity. And then the third thing I think that personally impacted me was that it's one of like the few points where you kind of like, despite all the time you have to spend thinking about your research, it's one of the few points where you have like free time, ironically, in that you get to decide how you spend your time. In the sense that like, okay, the joke is that like, in a PhD program, you have to work 7 days a week, but the good news is you get to choose which 7 days, but you do get to like define how you work. You get to pick like what works well for you. And like, if you turn out to be the kind of person who, does nothing throughout the day, but then works from like 9 p.m. through like 3 a.m., great, go for it. You can't really do that in like a corporate job. Or if you're the kind of person who like is extremely focused and can finish things within like 4 hours every day, great, do that. Most people go somewhere in between, but like, it's one of the few times where you're able to like just be paid to think about things on your own and, have that kind of independence that is like hard to find, short of, I think, like if you get like tenure as a professor and just like say whatever to the rest of the world. But like in a lot of other places I've worked at, it's like, you have like business needs or like other concerns in grad school, like you are able to just have like one singular concern and focus on how you want to do that. So that's how it impacted me personally. Professionally, it was also great because like, the kind of training and like expertise opened up a lot more jobs for me, and opened up a lot of opportunities. But that kind of flowed naturally from the PhD itself.
Very good. So I'll ask Winnie and Alfred, and then Merrick, I do just want to kind of reframe the question because I know you have yet to start, but it's just like, kind of like what you look forward to, when you do start. So, all right, Winnie, take it away.
Professionally, I guess it's rather straightforward. It's the pathway towards my current profession, and I guess it ties into kind of my impact personally as well, because from the time you're in college, usually, and then you're taking your pre-med classes and into actually being in med school and residency, it's a pretty long process, and it's sometimes a very solitary process because a lot of your college friends, they might be already working and they're all kind of making the milestones in their life, but you're still a student and it's like 4 years later, I'm still a student. But I will say that during that time you do feel yourself grow. Even now that I'm a hospitalist, I work with medical students. I can see kind of, that I was once a medical student, and the kind of the progress that you make over the years does add up. And the experience you get really is, every experience, good or bad, really does help formulate the way you practice now. And a lot of my closest friendships were people I met in medical school and residency because they kind of went through the same experience. So you can commiserate and share your thoughts about that. So, and it's kind of a weird profession. I had work today too, so I'm still in my work clothes. But even on like a very busy or tiring day and where you're just annoyed with everyone, just a very simple interaction, like your patient saying thank you, like you just like, oh, okay, I guess it wasn't that bad. So it's just a very interesting and very rewarding profession. So that's my experience.
Benefits that I reaped from attending and graduating from law school. So I would say that in law school, it involved a 3-year program studying the fundamental principles of American law and in a variety of core and advanced topics. So I think that in terms of my reading ability, and my command of professional English writing. I definitely strengthened my knowledge and ability to communicate effectively, both orally and in writing. Law school also teaches you to do legal analysis to improve upon your reasoning skills and problem solving skills. And you're able to research on a variety of legal issues. Um, Law school also taught me to recognize and resolve various ethical and integrity issues. And finally, to discharge professional responsibilities in the legal system. So it could be a role like an attorney, a judge, or a judicial clerk, even a policymaker. But even in my case, I'm in a law job, like being a government official or roles in the corporate government and public affairs. I think the professional training that you receive in law school is also very helpful to those ends.
So I could talk about what I'm looking forward to when I eventually matriculate. So I would say for me, it's being in that school environment again, kind of taking a break from work and having time to explore different interests again. So what I really hope to get out of it, I think it's being in that entrepreneurial environment. I think as a student, you have so many resources available to you, like access to funding from the school or grants. You have access to professors, and you also have the time to do it, at least for an MBA. And in general, like generally speaking, for those who didn't study business or without any kind of business background, people also do an MBA for that business experience. And another big reason why people will pursue an MBA is to pivot industries. So if you started from tech before, or you started in marketing and you kind of want to go into a more management role, a lot of people will pursue an MBA for that reason. But yeah, I think it'll be a really good experience. Already have some friends in the program, and it's been awesome connecting with them as we're kind of navigating our different career paths.
Very nice. All right. And this concludes kind of the general panel discussion. What we'll do now is we'll have breakout rooms. So each one of us on the panel, we will take charge of one breakout room. We all represent, all a huge swatch of industries. So now you can just feel free to join each room, and ask us more specific questions there. All right.